Today we will have an introduction to motion for animating type. The purpose of this video will be to introduce you to a few of the built-in options for type that Motion 3 comes with. So begin by opening Motion and selecting a multimedia large project. What we have in front of us are three panes. One is a browser. Down here we have our timeline, and on the left we have our inspector. The inspector has three main tabs to it: the file browser, the library, and the inspector. And I'll cover each of these three individually in a few moments. In the viewer, this is where we will see any changes that we can make. Unlike Final Cut, Motion will do everything as soon as we make a change, so we don't have to wait around for rendering. The timeline will be important for us to use for any minute adjustments and visualizing when each component will be added. Let's begin by taking a look at the left here. The file browser, you can look through any of your folders for video or images or any other kind of multimedia. We'll pass on this and we'll begin with making something from scratch. If we move to the library, we can see that we have all of these different behaviors, filters, image units, different generators, and down here there are three options for type. These three will be the three I focus on for this tutorial. Let's begin with just adding some type. So I can say hello. This black area will be anything that will appear in our video, and this white box is where my type will fit. So I can shrink that down just like in any other program, and I can select it. Now if I want to change the typeface or change the size, if I come up to Inspector in the top left here, then I'm given a whole new pane. We have the properties of the text. This is where I can change the position of the text. If I click and scroll here, I can move the text. I can move it down or up. I can rotate it. I can scale it. If I need it to blend with anything, I can do that. I can change the opacity. So maybe I want it to be translucent. If I'm putting this type on top of an object, maybe that's desirable. And I can also change the timing. So I can say, for this particular project, I want this to come in after 50 frames. You'll see over on the timeline that you can see that adjustment that I just made. For now, I'll put this back to entering at 0 frames. If I look at the behaviors, that's currently empty, and same with the filters. If I add filters or add behaviors, their adjustments will appear in this area. And then finally I have text. This is where I can choose different fonts. I could make this letter Gothic. Now you'll see that the O dropped down there, so I can just make that box a little bit bigger. Now, if I want to change that back, I'm just going to switch it back to Geneva. That's one of my personal favorites. I can change the style. here, this is where I can give it an outline. So now the text is outlined in red. I could make it glow. Let's change this color to maybe a green. Give it a bigger radius so you can see that it's starting to glow there. So there are a lot of multimedia options, a lot of graphic options that you can add to your text. If you're having trouble deciding what to add and what not to add to it, I would suggest you take a look back at assignment 1. Sometimes simplicity is best. Okay, maybe I want to animate this text. So if I go back to the library, I can select either built-in live fonts or some of these different text styles. These text styles might make the color different if I choose this one, for instance, or it might make it appear a little bit differently. Here you can see that it made it a serif font. If I need to change the font size here, I could use this inspector and change the font size. Now I can see the entire word hello. But in this case, again, that kind of calligraphy or fancier writing is more difficult to read than the sans serif font. If I want this to be animated, I could come over to live fonts, and if I just select one of these, you'll see in the top left here that it shows what it plays like. It tells you how long it will play for, if you have it installed, and then you can just apply it with this button here. I could also click and drag it onto the screen until I see the plus sign, or I can click and drag it down here on the timeline. Again, you'll see that plus sign. But I don't necessarily want the bar. We can explore some of these different ones. Blueprint, Buck. Some of them are pretty typical, an outline and a little bit of animation. Some of them are a little bit more animated, like Computer or the flip clock. Again, I would caution you here to ask yourself, what is the purpose of this text when selecting an animation? Sometimes the animation could become distracting for your viewer. The fog writer, for example, could be confusing for a viewer. Let's apply the fog writer. So I select my text, I've selected fog writer, I hit apply, and now you'll see that at this moment all of the text is gone. If I play this, you'll see that the fog writer animation continues. And for me in particular, I could not understand what was written there at all. I could try to increase the font size. Let's see here. And then I will move it and expand the text box, and hopefully we can fit everything in there. And let's try playing that. You can see that it expands from the center. If I scroll down here on the left, you see live font timing. You can see where it's generated from. You can see if it's playing forward, if it's holding at first or at the last. I don't like any of these options that I've chosen, so I'm going to edit undo. So now, for example, if I wanted to just make a brief introduction to a short video, I'm going to select my tool here, call this video my typography 10 video. Change the font size in the inspector on the left hand side. Change the positioning. Make sure that the text is coming in at 0. I'm going to go back and choose Geneva. And if I wanted to just have this fade in and out, there are several ways that I could do this. One way is by adding a behavior. I want the basic motion fade in, fade out. You'll see this purple bar appear at the bottom. There's its fade in time is 20 frames. In motion, everything we're dealing with is in terms of how many frames it takes to complete. Fade out time. And I could start an offset or an end offset, but I don't want to do that yet. Let's just test it out. You see it fades in quickly, and after 10 seconds or 300 frames, this multimedia project is done. You'll notice that it looped right there. You can turn that off by clicking this loop button. If I want the fade in time to be longer, we could make that 80 frames, and maybe it will be a very slow fade out. Go back to the beginning. Typography 10. Very slow fade out. Under that fade out piece, I could already be blending in whatever the rest of my video footage is, and that the text just fades away. Again, sometimes simplicity is best. Refer back to assignment 1 if you are looking for guidance on what kinds of typeface to use or any effects that could be used.